Welcome to Bold Notes. Today we will be going through the religious studies or philosophy A-level. There are three parts of this A-level: philosophy of religion, ethics, and Islam. We are going to be starting with the first unit today, being ancient philosophical influences, specifically talking about Plato and his views on metaphysics. Plato is an ancient Greek philosopher who lived from 427 and 347 BCE, and a former student of the great philosopher Socrates. Both are very influential philosophers that have paved the way for modern philosophy and ethics. Plato's theory is called the theory of the forms. He believes that there are two worlds, the world of the appearances and the world of the forms. The world of the appearances is where we are right now, and the world of the forms is where he calls the forms reside. But firstly, what is a form? A form is an idea of what a thing is. For example, if we all imagine the image of a cat in our mind, they would all be a bit different from each other. However, there are properties of a cat that exist in all our imaginations. For example, the cat having 4 legs, 2 eyes, whiskers, etc. All cats in the material world form an idea or the form of the cat. This form does not change and thus is everlasting. Plato argues that the true form, in this case, of a cat, must exist in the realm of the forms. The world we live in is a world of copies and imitations, but the world of reality is perfect and contains the original form of said object, and thus the form of a cat exists in the realm of the forms. This form consists of all our ideas of what a cat should be, all into one that is everlasting and does not change. There are many types of forms. There are higher forms, lower forms, and the form of the good. Lower forms are what we just talked about, for example, a form of a cat. Higher forms are concepts such as beauty, truth, justice, that also exist in the realm of the forms. Plato was more focused on this aspect of the forms. He argues that the reason why we recognize forms is because when we are born, we have a dim recollection of them caused by the soul, which is immortal and unchanging according to Plato. And before it was tied down to our body, it has seen these forms in the realm of the forms, and that's why we have a recollection of these forms. The form of the good is a concept that Plato calls the most important form, or the form of the forms. The form of the good is the ideal form of a form. Plato uses the analogy of the cave to prove his theory. Imagine a prisoner sitting in a cave, tied up, facing a wall. There's a bonfire behind him and people are walking by, casting shadows on said wall. The voices that they hear, that are actually from the people behind them, they believe are from the shadows. One day, one prisoner gets released and sees the bonfire behind him and realizes that his reality is false. He is then subsequently dragged out of the cave and sees the sun, which in this analogy is the form of the good. He then realizes the truth about the world we live in. The prisoner goes back into the cave to tell his fellow prisoners what he saw, but none of them believed him and laughed at his ridiculous story. The analogy of the cave proves that if someone has believed in something long enough, it is hard to convince them to change their belief in something else if there is no empirical proof for it, even if it is rationally and logically sound. The philosopher in this case is Plato, trying to tell us about the reality of this world, where there is another reality, the realm of the forms that exists above this realm. Plato's arguments have both strengths and weaknesses. One strength could be that this is a powerful analogy throughout time. It helps people understand through a priori reasoning, which is reasoning without the use of empirical evidence, that it is logical to assume that there is a realm above our realm. Secondly, Plato offers a rational argument for the existence of another reality or world. It provides people with a hope that the material world isn't all that exists, and that we can look towards a world of the forms as a more perfect form of existence. It is appealing as it offers a logical and reasonable theory concerned with the idea that there are universal concepts. Many philosophers, such as Immanuel Kant, for example, acknowledge the existence of absolutes. Finally, Plato's theory of the forms and his analogy of the cave encourages people to seek enlightenment rather than being caught up with the material world. However, a weakness of his argument comes from David Hume and Richard Dawkins. They believe that Plato's ideas of the physical world are counterintuitive, as it flies in the face of common sense to say that the world around us is an illusion, even though it seems so real. Another weakness is infinite regression. If you have the form of the good, according to Plato, which is a form of a form, what is stopping you from having a form of a form of a form? This leads to infinite regression as it goes on forever backwards. Plato claims that every concept only has one form in the realm of the forms. But with the form of the good, it can be argued that there is an infinite amount of the same form, which proves his point wrong. Infinite regression is to be avoided in philosophy as there are no explanations for it. Another weakness is that the values of good, beauty, or justice are very subjective concepts, and people can get their own opinions on these concepts, and thus, if everything can be classified as beautiful, then the form of beauty is everything, which makes it redundant and useless. Finally, empiricists such as John Locke, Bertrand Russell, and more argue, without empirical evidence, there is no way to prove that this realm of the forms actually exists. To quickly summarize what we covered in this video, we covered who is Plato, Plato's theory of the forms, the types of forms that occur in his theory, the analogy of the cave, strengths and weaknesses of his theory. In the next video, we will be going through Aristotle's metaphysical view. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.